Good afternoon, everybody, students and visitors. My name is Dr. Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean of the University Honors College here at Middle Tennessee State University. This semester's honors lecture series is focused on social justice. And today it is my pleasure to welcome our speaker, Dr. William Langston. Dr. Langston earned his bachelor's degree at the University of Houston and his PhD at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He is currently professor of psychology here at MTSU, teaches courses in cognitive psychology, research methods, among others, and is particularly interested in the psychology of belief. He's been recognized for his teaching by winning the MTSU Foundation Outstanding Teaching Award and also the McNair Program Mentor of the Year Award. He's probably won many other awards too. Dr. Langston is also the faculty advisor for the MTSU Lambda Association, which according to our website indicates that our Lambda chapter was founded in 1988 and as such is the oldest such chapter in the state of Tennessee. The Lambda Association is intended to provide a safe, secure, accepting environment for everyone in the LGBT plus community, including allies. Dr. Langston is going to contribute to our ongoing discussion of social justice in his presentation today, LGBT plus student activism and inclusion. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Langston.
Thank you, Dr. Phillips, for the introduction. My name is William Langston, pronouns are he, him. I am a professor in the psychology department. You forgot to mention that as part of my belief research, I am also a ghost investigator and do a lot of ghost hunting on the side because I'm not interested in the ghosts, but I'm very interested in the people who are looking for the ghosts. And that's an important part of my research program. So today, however, we're talking about LGBT plus student activism and inclusion. As Dr. Phillips mentioned, I'm the advisor for MT Lambda, and I've been in that role since 2002. And the MT Lambda organization has done a lot of work at MTSU to keep the university in a good place for LGBT plus students. And I took my brief for this lecture to talk about some of the work that the organization has done. And as I was preparing this, initially it was in chronological order, and I thought it felt maybe like there would be another way to organize it. And so this is actually organized as a primer on activism. And so I've pulled out 6 bullet points for activism that I'm going to discuss today, and I'll illustrate each with some of the work that MT Lambda has done. I want to emphasize that almost none of this is actually my ideas, but I've organized this and it definitely reflects a perspective. And if you're interested in more on this topic, at the LGBT plus college conference this past Saturday, we had a group of folks do a session called Perspectives on Activism to actually get more than just my perspective on the table. And that video will be posted soon on the conference webpage, and you can see a little more about the topic. So here's what I'm going to talk about today: visibility, managing expectations, developing capital, tending your garden, allyship, and hanging on to your history. And for each of these, we're going to drill down and see what lies beneath and go into more detail. So I'll just say the briefest amount of them on the splash screen, and then we'll get into the work. Also, I'll point out that every slide has as its background a pride flag from the LGBT plus community. And at the end, if you have questions, we can talk about what each of the flags represents and where they come from. So for visibility, it's often the first step in an activism agenda. It generates a little bit of controversy because whereas it's important to make sure people are aware that you exist and what your issues are, especially for LGBT plus folks, because some people, if we didn't have visibility events, would feel like they're the only person on earth who identifies the way that they do. But some would say that visibility is not worth anything if you don't actually try to change policy. Just on Thursday, when we started the LGBT plus college conference and an announcement went out that we were starting, I got an email from somebody saying, it's great you're having a conference, but what do you actually do for our students? And I thought, well, let me finish the conference and then come to my talk on Monday and I'll answer that question for you. But visibility is important. So I'm going to just show you some of the visibility issues from the history of MT Lambda. And what I have for you first are two front pages from the Sidelines newspaper from campus. They're both from September of 1988. If you are at all intrigued in this or any other topic, the Sidelines newspaper used to be the way that the campus communicated with itself. And you can see a great deal of MTSU's history through the Sidelines, and they're all archived at the library. So I didn't have a very hard time locating these and getting screenshots of them. And you can find all of the papers again in the library. In September 1988, right at the start of the school year, this front page article called Sexual Activity in KUC Bathrooms Prompts Changes. And the article claimed that gay men were going into the restrooms in the KUC building, which at the time was the main university center, and were arranging liaisons in the restrooms in the KUC. And the article has photographs of graffiti. I would recommend that you not look too closely if you are at all sensitive, because it's incredibly graphic and it has quotations from additional graffiti. And the publication of this front page article resulted in quite a stir on campus. The university removed the doors from the restrooms and for a period of time also from the stalls in the restrooms. And the doors stayed off for a long time. When I came for my interview here in 1997, I did my job talk in the KUC, and I remember thinking, why aren't there doors on the bathrooms? This is kind of awkward. So at least 9 years later, they still had not put the doors back on. Interestingly, or I guess tragically, a lot of the information in the article wasn't true. The photographs of graffiti weren't taken on campus. The stories were exaggerated or made up. But there was a lot of backlash towards LGBT plus people on campus as a consequence of this article. And 3 weeks later, you see a headline, proposed organization geared to support MTSU homosexuals. And that was the founding of MT Lambda. And it was literally inspired by this front page article in September of 1988. 3 men were the ones who founded the organization: Daniel Webster, John Weaver, and Richie Smith. And what they were interested in doing was combating this kind of information where a lot of exaggerated or made up facts were shared that agitated the campus against, at the time, mostly gay men, but LGBT plus students and members of the community, so that there would be a way to counteract this messaging. And when I took over in 2002, it was still an important part of Lambda's mission that when a member of the Sidelines editorial board went on an anti-gay or anti-LGBT plus rant in the paper, that we would organize a letter writing campaign and send letters to the editor to complain, to maintain visibility and counteract bad information. So keep in mind, the group founded over a gay bathroom panic. This theme of bathroom panic will reappear later on. We do some other visibility events that I think are really important and over the course of their time have had an impact on the campus. We just finished Spring Out Week, and that started in 2003. These are some pictures of Spring Outs and then some pictures of the exhibit that was in the library. So Dr. Phillips mentioned the True Black exhibit. MT Lambda had this exhibit a couple of years ago reviewing our history. And the keynote for that was Judy Shepard, who was the mother of Matthew Shepard, who was murdered in 1998 and was a really famous case of a gay bashing. And you can see we actually have one of the original tickets, which it's nice that the Gore Center exists on campus and maintains all of the ephemera of groups like MT Lambda, so that over the years you can still see and visit some of the history. In 2014, We added the LGBT plus college conference to the end of spring out. So Thursday, Friday, and Saturday now are the conference, and you can just see some snapshots from the LGBT plus college conference. It has a research day and then panel discussions, and then the Saturday is an audience participation day with strategy sessions and other activities. It's an important educational event and a visibility event, and it brings people from all over the state. The goal is to get every community college, university, and college, public or private, in the state to come to the conference to work on ideas and strategize. And then finally, in 2016, we added the Transgender Day of Remembrance to the visibility events. This happens in November. If you look there at the big circle, each one of the bags you see there represents a life lost to anti-transgender violence or suicide. Some of them actually are larger groups of folks. And the idea behind the Day of Remembrance is to acknowledge all the people who've been lost to anti-trans violence. And it's one of the most important visibility events that the group does. And I think if you haven't had a chance to attend that, it happens usually around Thanksgiving time on a Saturday in November. It's really one of the prettiest events that we do, and the most meaningful. All right, so that's visibility, just a taste of some of the stuff the group does. We do tablings. The idea behind visibility is to remind the campus that LGBT plus students exist, and then within the community to keep people from feeling isolated. You may not want to join MT Lambda, you may not want to be a part of a group, but when you see that the group exists and you see them acknowledge people like you, it makes you feel a little bit more at place in the university. So that's an important part of what we do. The second bullet is manage expectations. And I thought this one's really more related to your journey as an activist. Visibility events are usually fun for the group. They build cohesion. They're easy to get off the ground. But once you get into the work of activism, it can be really soul crushing and difficult. So if we drop down there and look below what's in managing expectations, I just made a few notes that I think can help if you're wanting to get engaged to help you be effective. And the first is to set your goals and prioritize what it is you want to do. As with anything, if you don't know what you're trying to do, you will achieve it, but it won't really be worth very much. So first thing, what do you want? And a super important part if you're trying to be an activist is figure out what people are doing and set your goals consistent with what people are already working on, as opposed to going rogue. So it's something to keep in mind. An important part of activism goals is that small is good. It sometimes feels like when you look at the world and you see all the things that need to be done and all the things that are high priorities, that your ability to contribute is so small that it's not even worth trying. And that's definitely not the right attitude to adopt. There was a lesbian bar in Smyrna that recently closed, but in the bathroom, they had a poster that I normally don't enjoy twee posters, but this one was the story of a little boy who was on the beach covered in starfish, and he was picking them up and throwing them back in the ocean. And a guy comes up to him and says, "Look at this beach, look at all these starfish. There's no way that you can make a difference throwing them back in the ocean." And the kid picks one up and throws it in and says, "Well, I made a difference for that one." And normally, those kinds of posters are kind of obnoxious, but I think that's a really good lesson is if you do every day some small thing to do something good for someone, anyone, anywhere, tiniest little thing, no matter what it might be, everybody doing that every day would add up to a whole lot of good, even if your contribution by itself doesn't seem like much. And so as you think about doing activism, you might be tempted to grab something huge. And institutions like MTSU operate on a glacial time scale. So someone like me who's going to be here for 30 or 40 or 50 years can see change that a student might not be able to see. It doesn't mean you shouldn't start the process, but you can't set your sights on achieving big goals as the only success because they're hard to get. So I have a couple of examples of over the course of MT Lambda's activism, what I would say are small victories, but a victory is a victory, right? We feel, and I'm still pretty hardcore on this, that without data, it's very difficult to know what you're supposed to do or what your challenges are. And currently, MTSU makes it very difficult to collect data because they won't put a checkbox on the application form for sexual orientation, gender identity, or personal pronouns. And so it makes it really hard to know if, for instance, some majors are harder for LGBT plus people to graduate from than others. And so as a compromise, the university did say that we could have a checkbox on the customs form. And so then we would know email addresses of people who might want resources. And at a minimum, we would know that, how many people were interested. And so this is from 2015, the year that the checkbox appeared on the customs form. And 293 people said they were interested in resources, which was a pretty decent chunk of the total number, and surprised everybody with how large the number was. And that helped us to communicate to the people who want the resources. And that's been a useful tool going forward. It's not the size accomplishment we want. It's not the big thing we were hoping for, but something's better than nothing. And then on diversity scholarship criteria, you'll notice it has gender identity expression and sexual orientation. It didn't used to have that in there. I was at a session for the Provost Access and Diversity Advisory Board at a town hall. And after the scholarship people presented, I went up and said, just out of curiosity, why aren't these things on there? And I thought there'd be some really complicated reason and it would be impossible to get it done. And they said, no one ever asked. And I said, what if I asked now? And they said, okay. And so there you go. I mean, it's a small thing in terms of getting this list updated, but it's a big thing if you qualify for a scholarship and can avoid student loans because of that. So, if any achievement's an achievement, and it's important if you're thinking about getting engaged in activism to remember that achievements count no matter how small they may seem. A really difficult thing for a lot of folks is pragmatism, because when you have a hard-fought battle and you get to the place where the person on the other side says, well, I'll tell you what I'll do for you is I'll give you 2 of these things you've asked for and half of this other, and I'm going to ask you to drop these. And the things that you're being asked to drop are really important. So for instance, when we got the resource box, one of the things that was a high priority at that time is making you able to put your proper name into the banner system so that if you're trans, for instance, your faculty aren't dead naming you in class. And the university said, no, but we'll give you this resource box if you'd like. And it's 2021 and we're still having faculty dead name transgender people in classes because you can't put your proper name into the banner system. And it was a hard thing to trade the amount of difficulty it causes people to have to explain over and over again that that's not their proper name and persuade their faculty to use the correct name when addressing them in class, when we wouldn't have to do that if you could put it into banner. It kind of wounds you a little bit to trade away somebody's desperately needed thing so that you can get something else. And if you're interested in activism, you have to understand that there will come a time in your life where you're going to get something or nothing, and you have to take something, and it is a crummy thing, and you never stop smarting from it, to be honest. As part of being an activist, so it's something to keep in mind. Another thing that's hard is you have to maintain professionalism at all times, regardless of what the other side may say or do. If you ever snap, you lose, and it's really hard sometimes. Here's a picture from the Houston ordinance that was attempted a while back to, as a city, grant protections for LGBT plus people. And as far as I can tell, I think the no men and women's bathroom that started the trans bathroom panic got tested and first really effectively utilized in this bathroom, or this battle rather, and ultimately helped to keep this from winning and caused Houston not to have an ordinance that protected LGBT plus people. And you might notice that in 1988, it was a gay bathroom panic. And when we got over gay bathroom panics, it didn't mean we weren't going to have more bathroom panics. It just meant that when we needed to discriminate against a new group of folks, we'd dust off the old bathroom signs and reword them a bit and back to work. And this year, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, we've dusted off the old no men and women's bathroom signs, and now it's no boys and girls athletic signs. And when a slogan works, and a campaign is effective, it just comes back around. It comes back around and comes back around. And it can be, as a person of some age who's been through multiple ones of these campaigns, it can be really frustrating to look at this guy and no matter what he says and no matter how he acts, try to maintain your professionalism, because if you snap, you're the bad person and you're the one that loses. And the other side will do everything they can to goad you into saying something you shouldn't or behaving inappropriately. And it is a struggle. And if you're interested in activism, you have to know that part of your struggle is going down that road again and having to once again present the arguments and the reasons why this person is wrong. And of course, in Tennessee, the legislature is on this guy's side. And so you have to go to the legislature and do your best. It's a difficult and painful process, to say the least, but that's part of being an activist. Part of self-care is to take your wins. So I've got the MTSU webpage here. I'm gonna just temporarily change my screen. So everybody keep your wits while we switch screens here. And I'm going to go to the MTSU webpage. And the reason I'm going to the MTSU webpage is because in the 1990s, the big campaign for MT Lambda was to get the university to have sexual orientation added to its non-discrimination policies. And Dr. Walker, whom the library is named after, he wasn't having it. And so the students and Dr. Walker went around a lot. And when Dr. McPhee came, pretty much instantaneously, he changed the policy and added sexual orientation to the campus policy. But then after that was added, if you go on to the MTSU webpage, and mine's covered up by the Zoom window, but here it is. So at the bottom of the page, it has the non-discrimination policy. And it used to have a little paragraph that said MTSU doesn't discriminate on the basis of, and then it listed some of the things. And I said, hey, you know, now that sexual orientation is in our policy, how's about updating the web page? And the university said, no, we will absolutely not update the web page. It's far too public to tell the world on the web page that we don't discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation, even though we do not. And it took a long time. It took well over a decade to resolve this issue. And what ultimately ended up happening is, are y'all on the web page? Am I showing y'all the right screen? I just realized I think I'm on the wrong screen. You know, this happens in class all the time, and my students never tell me. Here's the non-discrimination policy on the page right here. I didn't scroll down on yours. If you click this, it just links you to our full policy. And that way, we don't have to pick and choose whether we put federal policy on the web page or we put state policy or Board of Regents policy or MTSU policy. Here's the entire policy on non-discrimination. And now everything is listed the way that you would want. It was hard when they said they wouldn't fix the web page, and honestly, for a while, and I mean for a while of years, it felt to me and the students that we hadn't actually won anything, because even though it was a part of the policy, nobody would talk about it, which made you question whether they would enforce it as a policy if they wouldn't talk about it. And you can't be like that, right? When you get something after hard work, and it took 10 years to get the policy changed and the change in leadership at the institution, then you should celebrate your wins. And if you can't do that, you're going to have a hard life as an activist, because you never are going to be happy. And then finally, under manage expectations, you should expect a little backlash, or a lot of backlash, as the case may be. I've put two examples into the PowerPoint here. A few years ago, UT, University of Tennessee, Knoxville, in the sidebar of a newsletter from, it was either the diversity office or it was actually their LGBT plus center on campus. They said it would be reasonable. It's this orange here, right? Because it's from UT, so obviously it's orange. Otherwise, we would generally avoid that color at MTSU, but in this case, it's their slide. they said, you know, if you're talking to somebody, it's not a bad idea to ask them what their pronouns are, or listen for their pronouns and use the correct ones. And so, you know, you have she, her, hers, and he, him, his. And then for gender neutral pronouns, some people use they, them, theirs. And then there's some other options that people use. And it's really a pretty neutral thing. It just says, you know, in the same way that if you told me your name, you would expect me to use your name and not call you some wrong name. What pronouns are appropriate for you? And the legislature just lost their collective minds over it. It is difficult to believe such a ridiculous suggestion as gender neutral pronouns would be published on a university website without leadership's approval. To me, it suggests a lack of institutional control. And the legislature got involved and applied institutional control by taking away all of UT's diversity funding for a period of time and canceling all their programs that they had for diversity, to punish them for foolishly telling you that it's appropriate to use a person's right pronoun when you refer to them with a pronoun, which is kind of hard to imagine that it's worth that level of punishment, but it was. Here's an example from MTSU. MT Lambda, when it turned 25, I think this is the 25th anniversary of the organization, the library allowed the organization to put a display up, and there's some tables, they have some documents and some buttons you can get. And then we put these flags up here on the glass. And as you can see, there's rainbow flags, and there's the bisexual pride flag and the transgender pride flag and the asexuality pride flag. And then this one that when the student was grabbing the flags out of the office who was helping put the display up, he realized that there were 6 places and it would look nicer if it was balanced. And so this was sitting in the drawer, and he grabbed it and brought it over and put it up. And somebody decided that that was desecrating an American flag and started honestly an international storm over it. The Russian news service visited campus to investigate this flag desecration incident that took place, partly because after the storm began, and without talking to us at all, somebody came and stole the flag. And that's why this bottom picture, it's not there. And that made it worse. I mean, it was bad to begin with, but it went from national news to international news to a lot of attention being directed to the university. And of course, from your perspective, where you would be standing when that picture is taken is the reference desk, where a staff of people is sitting looking right at the wall. And it's kind of hard to imagine somebody could actually steal that flag and walk out of there in the middle of the day without anybody noticing. But that's what happened. And it was a very unpleasant circumstance. And to be honest, as I'm mostly an experimental psychologist who teaches research methods, and when somebody says to me a new fact that I know is suspect, I say to them, can you just show me your peer-reviewed research articles, and I will be more than happy to believe your fact. And of course, you know, if they can't, you know, they're wrong. And in this case, the person who initially started the flag desecration complaint, I went and found there's a gun range in Murfreesboro that uses the American flag in their advertising, which is illegal against the flag code. There's a veterans home that uses flags in theirs. Walmart has flag doormats and bathing suits. And I said, if you can just show me one time in your entire life where you've ever been concerned about flag desecration, I'll believe this isn't about LGBT plus stuff and take you seriously. And of course he couldn't. And so the equivalent of show me your peer-reviewed articles is show me your receipts. Show me where you really care about this issue, and I'll take you seriously. And that did not help the situation. And that relates to our maintain professionalism conversation that I was having with you earlier. That wasn't a very mature or responsible way for me to behave, and it didn't help the situation. And that's backlash. And you should definitely, if you're being an activist, you better expect it, because you're going to get it, right? Especially if what you're doing is important. I'm coming to the end of what's supposed to be my time, so I'm going to step on the gas a little bit. But at any point during the conversation, we can loop back to any of these topics and discuss them more. Develop capital is our third point. Let's drop that one, see what's below there. in this one, mainly, with what we're doing at MTSU, it's the same people having the same conversations with the same people over and over. And so for us, this is more important maybe than it would be if it was a more clear group that you would never do business with again. But it's super important as part of being an effective activist to find out what your opponent wants. And then if you can, align your goals so that it's obvious to everybody that when you win, we all win. At MTSU, it's pretty easy because MT Lambda has never asked the university to do anything that didn't benefit students. And with the legislature putting the entire funding formula and all of the university's goals on recruitment, retention, and graduation, I've never asked them to do anything that didn't help recruitment, retention, and graduation. And sometimes I have to make that obvious, right? I know that they don't want to put sexual orientation, gender identity questions on the application form because they're afraid that parents will see that and decide not to send their kids to MTSU because of that on the form. And I have to, if I want that to happen, I have to make clear that my goal to have the data so that I can see if there are disparate impacts from various things that happen at the institution for LGBT plus people. I got to know who they are in order to know if they're being affected differently. I'm not going to be able to get that to happen unless I can persuade MTSU that what I want is what they want, right? And then we need a clear path to a solution. So when they come to me, if we do a visibility event, we get their attention and they come and they say, all right, what do you want? What exactly do you need to have happen? I need to be very clear what that is. And I need to know before it starts what it is I want so that when they ask me what it is, I can tell them and they can deliver it, right? And then finally be a partner. Because again, I don't have a single goal at MTSU that isn't to advance the mission of the institution. I am a lifelong part of this university. And as a part of that commitment, I want it to be the best university it can be. And so do the people in administration. Sometimes when we're butting heads, it's hard to remember that. Outside of the campus, maybe it's harder. It's easier when you're doing it at work, right? It's harder when it's somebody that you can villainize in a way that maybe your work colleagues you don't. And then as part of developing capital, you should remember that tactics matter. So there are some things that you could do, like when you get mad about something, you could alert the media and you can bring a media firestorm down on the campus. But at the end of the day, that isn't going to advance the agenda for anybody. If you make everybody mad and upset, you might just lock them in at a position you don't want because they don't have a choice. If the person who didn't like our flag had come first to the student organization and said, I'm personally offended by this, I think we would have taken it right down. But once it became a First Amendment issue, we couldn't take it down, even if we wanted to. And it's your choice of tactics determines your outcomes. And it's hard. That's that part of that pragmatism thing. You got to start with stuff that it isn't very flashy, but you might win and no one ever even knows you had the battle. And that's good. That's what you want, right? So tactics matter. We can revisit the topic of tactics if you'd like. And then be a pest. I've been asking to have the name field activated in Banner for a long time. And after being told for years that it was just too expensive and that TBR wouldn't do it, it turns out that somebody new asked this year and the people at the Board of Regents said, nobody's ever even asked before. So if you don't keep nagging, you're never going to get what you want. But again, tactics matter. And then something important to keep in mind, because anytime you want to do anything, somebody's going to say to you, there's no money. There's never any money. There's never been any money, and there will never be any money. But if they really want to do it, there actually is money, right? So there's not money is not an excuse. And I just have a slide here as one example. When I applied to MTSU in 1997, this is the first letter I got from MTSU. And I'm just going to summarize this for you. There wasn't any money. And so even though they wanted to bring me in for an interview, they couldn't because there wasn't any money. And then there was money because here I am, right? So they're always going to tell you there's no money. And you're just going to have to say, well, I'm sorry, but go get some money, right? You can get money if you want money. All right. And then the fourth one rather is tend your garden. I think I can do this one pretty quick. I don't want to be super mean, but sometimes when you love people, you do have to say mean things to them, even when you love them. And tending your garden, as some examples I'll show you, don't maybe paint all of MTSU in the best possible light, but I would like to show you what I mean by this. When you have successfully, now I'm on the wrong one again. Hold on. Let me get this one. I don't know how I got these out of order. This is MTSU's LGBT page, which was a major achievement to get such a page on the university website. And I'll just look here at, let's just pick one thing, LGBT plus programming and events. The LGBT plus programming events put on by the university has on it the fall 2019 Pride Night. And that was September of 2019. And that's the last event that MTSU has put on for LGBT plus students at the university, done by the university. If you click on our Safe Zone program, where you can get Safe Zone training as a faculty or staff member so that you can be a supportive ally, students come to see you and you say, well, I'd like to join one of these upcoming Safe Zone trainings. You discover that our last Safe Zone training was November of 2019. And if I was the kind of person who would say this kind of thing, I'd say it's nice that a particularly vulnerable population that suffers from isolation under the best of circumstances just goes into hibernation in a pandemic, and the university can just quit offering services to that group because they don't need services in a pandemic. They'll be fine, right? And maybe when it's all over, we can get back to it. It's not enough to win. You get an LGBT page, you get Pride Nights, you get a Safe Zone program, and 5 minutes later, you don't have an LGBT page, and you don't have Pride Nights, and you don't have a Safe Zone program. And if you don't tend your garden, it doesn't matter how many things you get because they go away. And this is the least exciting part of activism, is somebody keeps the thing running in the background after everybody has forgotten how exciting it is that it was ever a thing in the first place. But you've got to do it as part of the work. Allyship Matters. Drop that one real quick. I'm nearly to the end, I promise, so we can get some questions going. If you would like to be an ally to any community, I'll just focus on LGBT plus because that's the one I do a lot of the work in. It's super valuable because we all have privilege and we all have different non-overlapping privilege. And I may have a lack of privilege because I'm gay, but I'm white, I'm male, I'm middle-aged, I'm cisgender. I've got a lot of privilege. And at the university, I'm a tenured, fully promoted professor, and that comes with an extraordinary amount of privilege. And I can use that to the advantage of people who may have less privilege. And honestly, it's something that you need to do if you're in that position. I have been in meetings with legislators at the state, and a straight person in the room happens to start the conversation, and that legislator is super friendly and loves us to death until they find out that actually we're here advocating for LGBT plus stuff and not against LGBT plus people. And suddenly the room goes cold, but that straight person can get things done I can't, because they can have a conversation I can't have. And without them, it's just not going to go as well, right? But while you're employing your privilege, make sure not to hijack the agenda. Find out what people are working on and work within the system, and don't make it worse, right? It's so frustrating when somebody decides to get engaged and the first thing they do is blow up a deal you've been working on for 5 years and make it go away. And so while you're trying to employ your privilege, be sensitive to the fact that other people have the agenda and you're there to help, right? And then finally, save your history. Somebody already stepped on my discussion here, but the MTSU Gore Center has their Movement 68, and you can go see the I Am True Black stuff in the library right now. And this is a collection of the efforts to integrate the university and fully break away from our, let's just say, overly Southern proud past at the institution. And if you didn't save your history, if none of these documents existed, we wouldn't know anything about what happened or what the movement was. And I think it would be super important for anything you do, hang on to your papers. The MT Lambda archive is at the Gore Center, and you can go check that out. It's available for scholars to understand what happened at the institution, to see the lives of average students going to MTSU doing work. And if you don't save your history, well, it's not going to save itself, right? And then nobody's ever going to know any of the past or anything that happened. And that takes me to the end. So I am going to pause here and open it up for questions.